going deep, 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 deep.
Good morning. Welcome to Ripon Community Church. My name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. Man, it is good to have all of you here this morning. It is a fun, eventful day here at Ripon Community Church and Ripon High School. Obviously, the basketball tournament is going on. It's the second of three, so there's one more going to happen this spring. But you guys have been amazing. Just wanting to still come here and be here in this place and worship God, and it's kind of fun. I just love it because I love the double takes people have. Like as they walk by the auditorium here, they're like, oh, what is going on in there? And like they'll hear the worship music beforehand. It's just a really cool thing. So I really love that. It brings an extra fun energy. And I also love how excited you guys are still about being here in this place. We're in a series right now, if you couldn't tell, based on the little music we just heard, called Deep. And we've been talking all about what deep really looks like to God, not to us, and what that looks like in our lives in real and practical ways. Today we're going to talk about how that looks with one of our everybody's, Everybody Plays. We've been going through the ways that looks through the everybody's for our deep. So today we're going to talk about how getting in the game and actually being somebody who's not sitting on the bench just kind of watching from the sidelines, but somebody who actually plays and is part of what's going on here, how that can be a way for you to be deep. One quick note, with the basketball tournament, we don't have coffee and donuts like we usually do, but if you want to support them and thank them for sharing this space with us, because they were here before we ever were, you can grab yourself a little treat over there. They've got lots of good stuff over at the concessions thing, and then we'll be back to our regularly scheduled donuts and coffee next week. But first, I want to just take a moment and talk about what deep is. What does deep actually look like? And like I said, not what deep looks like according to us or to me or to some random person on the street. I'm talking about what deep looks like to God, what God would say deep is. In Colossians 2:7, God says this. It says, "Let your roots grow down into Him, and let your lives be built on Him. Then your faith will grow strong in the truth you are taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness." As I read that verse and I think what he's kind of getting at with what deep looks like in a life, I get a picture of a tree in my head. Deep is like a tree, right? You got these roots that go down and they basically mirror what's on top. There's roots that go nice and far down into the ground, understanding and drawing up nutrients. And so as I think about how that picture applies to us in our lives, I think that our roots, as we have them grow down into God and who He is, it's an understanding of why. It's an understanding of who God is and why it is we're supposed to live the way we're supposed to live. And then as the tree then sprouts out, it'd be weird for the tree to be just this short little stub of a tree. For them to have a roots so far into the ground and then for it to have this little measly thing on top, that would be awkward or weird. You would see a tree that's healthy growing up and matching how deep the roots are. And as I think about the tree and what that represents, you can see it being the way that our understanding of who God is and the why of how we're supposed to live being reflected in how we actually live. It's our actions. It's what we do. So for me, as I look at what God understands deep to be and what He expresses for deep to be for us, deep is doing the right thing for the right reasons. It's loving your neighbor because Jesus first loved us. That's what deep is. And so we're going to get into that. We're going to get into what it looks like then for how deep plays out in real life. And it does in so many ways. There's so many different examples of how deep can play out. But today there are going to be 3 ways that we'll talk about how going deep can look like when it comes to playing and getting in the game and not just sitting in the sidelines or, in our case, in the nice comfy seats you're all sitting in. I'm actually doing something more than that. The first way that deep can actually play out in our lives and in the way that we play the game is this. Deep looks like leading. Deep looks like leading. Show of hands. I'm not going to have to make you do anything or any of that kind of stuff, but how many of you, whether when you're growing up or recently, you've heard the story of Daniel in the lion's den? A lot of you have heard this story. It's a great story. I love this story. It's one of the stories my kids always pick to read at night if we're reading the Bible. And they love it because there's so much drama in it. But if you haven't heard this story before, a quick little summary of it. There's this king, his name's King Darius, and he's just become king, and he decides that he's going to divide his whole country, which is a vast, vast country, into about 120 provinces. And Daniel, along with a couple of other people, are going to be the administrators overseeing these 120 provinces. Now, who's Daniel and how did he get here? Daniel is this Jewish guy. He was taken captive by the Babylonians. So the Babylonians, they come on into the Jerusalem, and they take everybody out of Jerusalem and basically lead them back to Babylon to put them to work. And what King Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king at the time, does is he takes all the handsome, smart, strong young men, and he brings them into his palace and has them do, he has them indoctrinated with the culture of the day. They're going to learn all the smartest ideas, learn all the right ways to do things, and then once they've been indoctrinated, they will then become his advisors. And so Daniel is one of these people, and it's crazy if you want to read the story. It's really, really fun. You can go to Daniel. But he ends up doing super well. God blesses him because Daniel essentially wants to follow the way that God wants him to live, with how he eats, with how he acts, with who he prays to, and we'll get to that in a minute. But as he leads in this way, Daniel becomes blessed with authority. The kings notice that this Daniel guy, he's something. We're going to keep on promoting him over and over again because everything he touches goes great. But here's what happens with King Darius. So, like I said, he's got 120 provinces. Daniel, a couple other administrators, going to be put in charge of these provinces, and it goes great right away. Daniel especially does fantastically well, that everything he does goes swimmingly well. And the other people that are administrators are getting jealous, and the king sees it as well, and he thinks to himself, I am going to promote Daniel to an even higher position because he's just doing so well. He's doing great. We're going to promote him. That's what you do. Now, these other guys, they don't like that very much. They're a little frustrated about it, and so they hatch this conspiracy. It's like, we got to get rid of Daniel. He's making us all look bad. Things are going poorly for us because of him. He's doing great. We don't look good. Not good. So we're going to do something about this. And so they conspire this plan. They're going to go in by the king, and they're going to flatter him. They're going to make him feel really good about himself, and then get him to sign off on something that would make life terrible for Daniel. This is what it says. It's in Daniel 6 through 9. It says, so the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, long live King Darius. We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the lion's den. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it can be changed, an official law of the Medes and the Persians that cannot be revoked. So King Darius, I suspect, feeling pretty good about himself in this moment, signs the law. Now, these conspirators, they do this for a reason. They do this because they know Daniel prays 3 times a day without fail. He's a devoted man, and so that's what he does. That's what he's going to do. So Daniel goes and prays to God, not to the king. And the conspirators, knowing this will happen, go to where Daniel prays, watch him do it, go back to the king, and they say, hey, king, guess what? Daniel, he's not obeying our law. Your law that you just signed about how amazing you are and how everybody should pray to you, he's not obeying that. You know what happens next. You're supposed to throw him to the lion's den. The king is devastated. He does not like this at all. He sees that he's been tricked, but he can't revoke this law. It's what it's supposed to happen. And so he sits on it for a day or two, and he's just beside himself until finally he realizes he just has to do it. And so he takes Daniel, and they take Daniel, and they throw him into the lion's den, and they seal it up. And that night, it's crazy, right? I can't imagine what that must have been like. But let's pause here for just a second before we get into the rest of the story. What Daniel did, he was told by the king, the king's orders, don't pray to anyone but him. And yet he knows in himself that the right thing to do is to pray only to God. That's the only right thing to do. And so he does the right thing. It's really hard. There's obvious consequences coming, and yet he still does it. As I look to who God is and how he defines deep in the real world and the people that he puts in charge in different ways, I think that is a fantastic picture of leadership. Even when it seems like everyone is against you, if you want to be deep, if you want to really follow Jesus, it means following God with integrity, even in the face of consequences. And you don't have to be Daniel to do it. I mean, Daniel's like way up there, right? Like, that's amazing. I'm going to have a really hard time doing what Daniel did in the face of being thrown to lions. It's going to take me a bit. But this wasn't Daniel's first time. He had history. If you look at his story, he first started with what food he ate, with smaller consequences, and over again it repeats itself. We can grow that kind of history too. We can practice when the stakes are maybe a little bit lower. Because leadership, it doesn't only happen out front or on the stage or at the end of the boardroom table in the boardroom. Leadership happens everywhere. It happens in the living room. It happens in the classroom. It happens in the hallways at school or at work. It happens in the break room. It happens at the school pickup line. It happens for sure at the kitchen or dining room table. When you lead your life in such a way that people take notice because it's just different. It's just different than what people are used to. That's leadership. That is what leadership looks like. Now for Daniel, it appears that this form of leadership was finally about to get him killed. It was finally the last thing that he did that was just a little too much. And so you feel this anxiousness about it, right? Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den, and the king, after sealing him up, he can't eat. He normally gets entertainment every night. The musicians come and play for him, and he says, no, go away, I don't want to hear it. He barely can sleep all night, and then so finally at dawn, he wakes up super early, and he races to the den of the lions. This is what he says, Daniel 6:20. When he got there, he called out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God whom you served so faithfully able to rescue you from the lions? I imagined the moment of silence that seemed like forever. Until finally Daniel yells out, long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me. For I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty. Vindication. Especially large vindication, because shortly thereafter the conspirators, it says, get thrown to those same lions, and their bodies don't even hit the floor before being ripped apart by the lions. Not so good for them. And even crazier and more amazing is what happens next. The king, right after that, makes this proclamation to the entire kingdom that essentially says, worship Daniel's God over any others. He's the greatest God. The king of Babylon. The king of Babylon, this massive empire, bigger than what America is. When you think about how far-reaching and expansive it was and how many kingdoms it oversaw. It's crazy. This king does this incredible thing of saying, let's worship God. If you want to play in a deep way, if you want to get in the game, lead with your faith wherever you are. Lead with your integrity that comes from following Jesus. You can lead by choosing not to gossip. Mike talked about that last week. A lot of people mentioned how impactful that was for them. You can lead by taking the hard way instead of the cheap shortcuts. You can lead by caring for people that others rarely desire to care for. It's an incredible way to lead. Honestly, it could get hard. There's no promise of easy here. It could be very difficult. But God has this knack for honoring and promoting and doing awesome things and giving good gifts to people who lead in this way. Start with small acts and the little things, and as it expands, you'll be more likely and more able to make those hard calls, those hard choices. You can get off the bench and into the game by living your faith in your everyday life. You can lead in that way. The very first way for how to play is to lead. Well, that's number one. That's the first of the three. The second, I really like the second because it has you actually getting off your chair and into the world and moving your literal feet. It gets you off the bench and gets you playing. It's to serve. Number two is to serve. There's this time, Jesus, he gets this terrible news. John the Baptist had been arrested by Herod, and he's been in Herod's court and in the prison there. And Herod kind of liked him, but under some crazy circumstances, he ends up having to execute John the Baptist. And so news of this spreads to Jesus. And gets to Jesus, and of course, this is his friend. This is somebody he cares about. And so Jesus goes off into the wilderness to be alone for a little bit. Word travels that Jesus is off out in the wilderness, and so people want to be by Jesus. So they head to where Jesus is. They head his direction, and they find him. And when they see him, Jesus, in his characteristic way, has mercy on them. He sees them in their desire to be taught and healed, and he can't help himself but take care of these people. So he begins to heal people that are sick. The disciples are out there, and they see this happening and kind of going down. And they're like, oh, hey, Jesus, we're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no food here. Like, we've got nothing. And here are these thousands of people, literally thousands of people. What are we going to do? What are we going to do, Jesus? Jesus says this. It's Matthew 14:16. I love how blunt he is. He says, but Jesus said, that isn't necessary. You feed them. The disciples want them to go back. He says, no, that's not necessary. Don't send them back. You feed them. You feed them. The disciples complain. They say to Jesus, we've got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Like, there's thousands of people out there, well over 5,000 people. We're not going to feed them with these 5 loaves and 2 fish. You don't understand, Jesus. Send them home. And Jesus says, hey, those loaves of bread and those fish, you just bring them here. So he grabs them, and he blesses the food. He breaks the bread. And then there's something that it says in the text that I often missed. And maybe you've missed it too. I think it's incredible. It says, Matthew 14:19, then he told the people to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven, and blessed them. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave the bread to the disciples, who distributed it to the people. Did you catch it? Did you catch how this played out? It says, he gave the bread to the disciples. Jesus didn't start handing it out. He blessed the bread and the fish, and he gave it to the disciples, who distributed it to the people. It says they fed well over 5,000 people. And at the end of it, they had 12 baskets left over. Jesus didn't feed the people. The disciples did. Jesus made it so that there was plenty of food. He made it so there was enough food. There was the miracle there. But the disciples passed it out. They did the serving. The disciples served the first ever Wonder Bread. Okay? Bad, terrible, horrible dad joke. But the reality is, the second way that you can get off of the bench and into the game is to actually play, is to serve. It's to serve other people. You can serve others by feeding them what Jesus has already given to you. In 1 Peter 4:10, it says, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. That's in 1 Peter 4:10. There are these gifts that Jesus has given to us. These gifts. You have spiritual gifts, these amazing things that God gives to us. You have God-given talents and experiences. All of this is in the Place seminar that we have, the Everybody Plays seminar. It's actually coming up in 2 weeks. You should check it out. It goes all into these kinds of things that you have that you can use to serve. It's awesome. I encourage you to go there. But But you've been given all of these things so that you can use them. I mean, I always thought that Jesus fed the people. No, it wasn't Jesus feeding the people. Can you imagine being the disciples and there's this bread that was 5 loaves and all of a sudden you can barely carry it? All of a sudden you're handing it out and it just keeps on being able to be handed out? Can you imagine feeling and experiencing the miracle with your own 2 hands? Wouldn't that be wild? It is wild. But you have to know it's available to you too. You have that same capacity. It's available to us. We have access to that reality. We can be part of God's miracles too. You've been given gifts by Jesus. You've been given the miracle. Now you get to give it out. You get to serve. And it's as simple as maybe, snow blowing a little extra sidewalk. It's actually been a gift given to us this winter so far. Neighbors on both sides I think they realize we have a 3-month-old baby. And so getting out in the morning is maybe a little more difficult than it normally was. And so they just kind of go all the way past our sidewalk. I'm like, thank you. It's awesome, right? It's an amazing gift. It could be dropping off a casserole. It could be seeing a need and meeting it without even saying a thing. You just kind of do it. It could be serving at the food pantry or at Traded Treasures and helping people in the community that are just having a bad stretch. It could be going on a mission trip. We have one coming up this summer. There's a couple more opportunities coming up pretty soon. Be on the lookout for that. It's an awesome way to actually serve and get off of the seat and into the game and play. Next 2 weeks, actually, the next 2 weeks here after the service, we're going to have something we're calling a Get in the Game party, where we're going to have all kinds of opportunities out there in the commons where you can sign up for something that fits with who you are. It's going to be awesome. We're not going to pressure you into doing anything, but you have tons of opportunities to if you would like. If you'd like to actually do something and be part of the awesome things happening here, that is going to be an awesome thing happening the next 2 weeks, and Get in the Game party. But here's the point. You don't have to wait around. You don't have to say a prayer and say, Jesus, please do this, and then just kind of wait for him to do it. No, you can do it. He's given you the miracle in the gifts he's given you, and you just get to distribute it. You've been handed those miracles by Jesus. Now it's time to share it. If you want to take your faith to a deeper place, then expect to get a little messy. Expect to get some dirt under your fingernails, to move your literal feet, to put yourself in a situation where you're serving others. Like it says in 1 John 4:19, it says, we love each other because he loved us first. I love that verse partially because my kids right now are learning it through our children's ministry. They're learning to memorize that verse, which I think is awesome. We love each other because he loved us first. So, how to play? You can play by leading. You can play by serving. And finally, there's one more way to get in the game that we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to tell you about something that I did when I was in college. The admissions department had asked me to give a little speech to a bunch of people who were people who would give scholarship money, basically. So I had been on the receiving end of it when I went to the school. It was great because I'd gotten some scholarship money, and it helped me be able to go to this school, and it made it really awesome in that way. And so for me, I get to speak to this group of people who are giving money to make that possible for different people to be a part of that place and be part of that school. And I was really grateful to say thank you. I get the chance to say thank you to some people who are making it possible for me and a bunch of my friends to be there. And so I got up on stage, and I started speaking. I was real nervous because speaking to a bunch of people, I don't know, I'm still nervous, so there you go. But I get to speak to these people, and I talked about something that I had grown up doing. I grew up on a farm, and so it was something that made sense to me. And talked about how you plant a seed, and how you have to till it, you have to take care of it, you have to make sure it gets water, you have to do all these different things, and then you grow, and then you weed it. And eventually it becomes a harvest, and it's awesome. And I talked about how I wanted them in that place to be able to own for themselves the reality that the harvest that was happening, that was them in a large way. They made the harvest possible in substantial ways, and they could own that for themselves. They could own it. And the world is a better place because these people were able to get scholarships and go to school and do these things. They could own and appreciate what was coming of that because of what they had given. So here I stand some 11, 12 years later, something like that. And I tell you as bluntly as I can possibly tell you, the effect their giving had on students at a college pales dramatically in comparison to the effect your giving to God here at RCC has. And I want to tell you why. For starters, you can't help but think of kids, right? Children's ministry, I told you what verse they were learning. These kids, because they're getting to be here and learn about Jesus and God's love, will grow up knowing that God loves them and we love them. But not only that he loves them now as they're cute and innocent little kids, but even when they grow up and make mistakes, God will still love them. We get to give these kids the amazing gift of knowing that God loves them even when they're naughty, even when they make mistakes. They get to grow up with a healthy understanding of God's love. It's incredible. We get to have students who grow up and they get to be in a place that's safe to ask hard questions about faith because we know we've all had them. And they're at that time where they just come. And so they get to go to a safe place to ask those hard questions, and they also get to go off into the world with this ability to have a strong foundation to help guide them and protect them. We have hurting people at this church, hurting people who have received care and compassion in times of need, prayers and support and meals. If you've had a baby, maybe you've even gotten some diapers. There's amazing things that we do for people in those situations. There's people's lives that literally get changed, shifted from one type of life to a completely different type of life where they're just in this rough, scary place and they come and they see who Jesus is and there's a dramatic change. That happens here all the time. But maybe even more for you, more personally, as you look in the mirror, maybe it's for you in your own life. And you didn't even know that you needed Jesus in this way, but you kind of realize like you've just been hiding the stuff. It's just been stored behind this thick curtain where you didn't want everybody to see and you didn't want to talk about it. You didn't know how to talk about it, so you didn't. You just kind of held it all together, but then being here and seeing what Jesus says and how he can teach you, you've seen how your life can be dramatically different. And so these areas that have needed attention finally have gotten some attention because Jesus has touched them. There's broken families who have found and extended forgiveness and even enjoy seeing each other on a Sunday morning. There's people here and around the world that have their lives dramatically changed. I don't know if you know this or not, but every dollar, every penny given here, we take 10% of that and give it towards missions here and around the world. And it's wild, the difference. And it's not just anybody. You have to go through a rigorous process to actually access those funds to make sure that's doing exactly what we hope to continue to further and further God's kingdom here and around the world. God is literally changing this community and the world through RCC, which means God is literally changing this community and the world through you. Through you. Because you are this church. You don't just go to this church, you are this church. In 2 Corinthians, Paul is talking to the Corinthian church, and it's almost like he's talking directly to RCC. He says, since you excel in so many things, he says, since you excel in so many things, I think you guys excel in so many things here at RCC, in so many ways. In your faith, you guys are incredibly faithful. I have met some of the most faithful people who have been going through the most difficult struggles. I got a text from somebody this morning who goes through crazy struggles the last month, and his faith blows me away. There's so many of you. There's So you excel in so many ways, in your faith, in your gifted speakers. I mean, last week I got to hear Mike talk about some things that I like, oh man, I need to look at that in my life. We have so many gifted speakers, whether it's Mike or Erica or Aaron or whomever, and your knowledge is growing. You've been a part of so many different things through community groups and midweek Bible study, and now we're doing the read-along on the YouVersion plan, which is awesome. You can get to it on RCC Sunday. Your knowledge, your enthusiasm, and your love for us, it could have been written directly to us as a church. It's like he wrote to us. RCC, look at all these things you're doing incredibly well. But the final thing Paul wants the church to grow in is this. I want you to excel also in this gracious act of giving. Faith matters. Good teaching matters. Understanding the why matters. Having enthusiastic faith matters. And yes, too, Paul says, does giving matters. And Jesus would go right along with that. He says this in Matthew 6:19 through 21. Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. When you give, you store up treasures in heaven, but you know what? Like good investment, you also get dividends right here and right now. You get to own the good that's accomplished now. Those scholarships at that school were nice. They had an impact, but I have to tell you, the impact that's possible and the blessings you can experience by owning that impact here and now blows that scholarship money out of the water. God is doing incredible things here at RCC. Like it's like owning stock in the Packers, right? Some of you might have that. And you don't have small little perks you get, but when they win, you're like, yeah, it's our team. You can actually say we, and it's okay, right? We won, because you own it. You can own the impact here, and that blows that out of the water. You can own and celebrate and say we won with all the amazing wins that are happening here and now. And it's the third way to get in the game and play. In fact, it's the best way to multiply your efforts so that so many others can be part of the team too. Owners, people who help pay the way, make it possible for the players to actually play. You're the church. There's not some other people somewhere that make this possible. It's all of us. We do this. God multiplies our giving into amazing efforts that change this community and the world. So you can lead, you can serve, and you can give. And those are nice things to say. They're nice ideas, lofty ideals, and that sort of a thing. But we're not really much on giving you these lofty ideas without giving you a way to actually put it into action. So we want to help you grow your roots like that tree. And then we want to challenge you to stretch out your branches with actions. Meg, my wife, this last week, she said something that I think was quite brilliant, and she's been doing this a lot lately. It's frustrating. She's saying all this smart stuff. It happens all the time. It's always happened. But she said, how you spend your time is how you spend your life. How true is that? How you spend your time, and I'd add to that, how you spend your resources. This is the stuff we make our lives out of. This is what makes it. So I want to give you 3 things you can do, 3 ways that you can spend your life in deep, meaningful, and lasting ways this morning. And the first thing I'll do, the host, if you guys want to grab them, I'm going to pass out these cards. They look like this. You'll get one in a little bit. You can just take one for each family. You can just kind of pass them down. But they're a giving card. And I'm not here to twist your arm to give, but I want to give you an opportunity to actually say yes if you want to. So on the card it says, I commit to getting in the game by growing my generosity. And you can check one of these 3 steps. And you can put your name on there if you want to. But the first step is, I'm not ready to give yet because I don't know enough about RCC. Great. And it says, let's chat. If that's you and you're like, hey, I've got questions. Where does the money all go? What does this do? How does it all get worked out? We would love to have that discussion with you. You can mark that, and then we'll talk to you. The second one is, I commit to being more generous with my giving at RCC in 2020, whatever that means to you. We're not going to come back and circle around and say, oh, you didn't do this. This is between you and God. And the last thing is I commit to tithe 10% of my income to God at in RCC. We talk about how 10% of everything that we give as a church to missions, it goes to missions. That's because God directs us to tithe. If you're not there yet, you're not there yet. But maybe you've been giving strongly for a while, and that is the next step you want to take. Feel free. And the final thing is I'm not interested in taking steps to grow my generosity at this time. You can definitely check that one if that's true. Don't go, this is between you and God. We don't care. This is between you and God. The reason to check that one is maybe you're already generous and you're already happy with what you're giving. That would be totally fine as well. Or maybe you're just not there yet. You don't want to take that step yet. But I want to give you this because it's important to actually act. You've heard the why. You've heard the understanding. You know what God says about it. But if we just left you there, you'd be a deep-rooted tree with a tiny stub of a tree on top. This is what makes it deep. So as you get these, you can fill these out. You can put them into the offering basket as they come along. But the second thing is this, and I just mentioned a little bit ago, next 2 weeks we have a Get in the Game party. And if you haven't had a chance to serve here at RCC, you should do it. Try anything. If you don't like it, stop. Try something else. You're not going to offend anybody. But it's an awesome way to own this and be the church, be RCC, not just attend. And then the final thing is this, if you go to rccsunday.com, you can sign up for Leadership Academy. I've had all kinds of questions over the past couple of weeks about Leadership Academy, and I want to just straighten it out. If you're asking the question, is Leadership Academy for me? The answer is yes. And I'll tell you why. Because I have been led by people who do not stand on stages, do not lead in boardrooms, do not whatever the typical leadership thing is. That's who I've been led by, maybe more than I've ever realized. And when we talk about Leadership Academy, it talks about leadership at business, with your family, at home, in the classroom, wherever. And it happens. And you can do it. You can be part of it. So if that's interesting to you, it happens 8 times through 2020. It's been one of the best courses I've been a part of. I really love it. I encourage you to be part of it. You can sign up there. With all that said, the final word is this. Maybe you're just visiting today. You're like, oh man, I'm talking about money. If you've been here for a while, you know that we rarely talk about money. We only talk about money when we feel like God says to talk about money, and it never has to do anything with the budget. We're talking about it because it's a way for us to actually act on what God has us acting on. To grow deep by actually acting out and stretching out our branches. And then that's one part of it, but it also extends to how we lead in everyday life and how we serve in everyday life. And it matters. The impact we can have for God in our lives is incredible. Don't leave here without making a decision to act in one of those 3 ways. Any of those 3 ways would set you on the course to have a dramatically deeper relationship with God in the rest of 2020. With that, I'm going to say a prayer, and we'll finish with some worship. Dear God, we are so grateful that you lead us. There's so many situations in our lives where it's not clear, it's murky. But in this case, in knowing how to grow our faith in a deep way, it's not murky at all, it's clear. We can lead. We can lead in our everyday lives, whether at home or at work or wherever with our friends. We can serve. We can get in the game and play and be part of it and not just watch, but be beyond the field. And finally, God, we can give. We can own the amazing things that are happening here, that you're making happen through our generosity and our actions. Help us to be part of those things. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
So at this point, we're going to receive the offering. The hosts are going to come down. They're going to pass the baskets. And if you came prepared to give, you can put a money or a check right in the basket. Or you can give online right now at rccsunday.com using your phone. And here's how you do it. You go to rccsunday.com and you find the little gray giving icon and you click on that and then just follow the instructions. And there's options for using a credit card. You can use a bank account. You can give a one-time gift. You can set it up to be a reoccurring gift. So lots of options, very customizable, very easy to use. This is a great way just to honor God with your giving and support RCC with your finances. So thanks so much. Let's continue on with the service.